Fall of Icarus, the challenge of Poseidon. Icarus had long been the symbol of hubris, a warning to all those who dared to defy the gods. He flew too close to the sun with wings his father Daedalus had crafted. Wax melted under the heat of Helios, and the feathers scattered into the open sky. He fell, tumbling from the heights like a star stripped from the heavens, plummeting down into the vast waters below. The world assumed he died that day, consumed by the angry waves. But in truth, Icarus had been spared. Fate, it seemed, had something different in store for him. Chapter 1. Rescued by the sailors. His body floated on the waves like driftwood, battered but alive. Fishermen from a nearby island saw him from their boat, unconscious but breathing, and took him aboard. Their small vessel creaked under the weight of the waves, but these were seasoned men of the sea, knowing the ocean's temper and temperament well. They saw the pale youth and his scorched wings, now useless remnants of his father's masterful invention, and whispered to each other about the gods. "Some say it was his arrogance," said one of the sailors, a grizzled man with a scar that ran down his face like a jagged lightning bolt. "But others claim the gods have spared him for some reason we don't understand yet." They carried him back to their village, a small fishing community nestled on a rocky outcrop by the sea. There, Icarus was nursed back to health by a kindly healer named Thalina. She tended to his burns and bruises, mending his body with salves made from seaweed and herbs that grew in the cliffs. He awoke days later, dazed, confused, but alive. His once majestic wings had been torn apart. Only a few feathers clung to the fragile skeleton of what was left. His father's greatest invention was now a sad, tattered memory. But Icarus was grateful, for he had been given a second chance at life. For weeks, Icarus stayed in the village, learning to walk again, feeling the earth under his feet with the weight of gravity. The islanders treated him kindly, though there was an undercurrent of fear that surrounded him. They knew his story. Word spread quickly among sailors, and the fall of Icarus had already become the stuff of legend. Some feared that the gods had cursed him. Others wondered if he was now favored. But there was one thing they did not know. His story was far from over. Chapter 2. The Whispering Sea. It was during one of his walks along the shore that Icarus first heard the voice. He stood on the cliffs, looking out at the sea, still trying to make sense of what had happened to him. The wind carried a salty breeze, and the waves crashed below, rhythmic and constant. It was a sound he had grown used to during his time of recovery. But that day, the sea sounded different. It was as though the waves were whispering something to him. "Icarus," came the voice, deep and echoing. He frowned, thinking he had imagined it. But then it came again, more insistent this time, reverberating through the cliffs and the foam-tipped waves. "Icarus, you are not forgotten." Suddenly, the water before him churned violently, and from the depths rose a figure tall and imposing. His skin was the color of the darkest blue ocean, his hair cascading like waves around his shoulders, and his trident gleaming with the power of the sea. It was none other than Poseidon, god of the sea and all its creatures, his eyes stormy and filled with curiosity. Icarus fell to his knees instinctively, recognizing the divine presence. Poseidon's gaze was fixed upon him, a mixture of interest and amusement dancing in his eyes. "Stand, Icarus," Poseidon commanded. "I did not come to witness your groveling." Trembling, Icarus rose to his feet. "Lord Poseidon, why? Why have you come to Mem?" The god smiled, though there was a hint of danger in that smile. "You fell into my domain, boy. And yet, you did not drown. I watched you fall from the skies, cast down by your own folly, and yet I did nothing. The sea did not claim you that day, though it could have." Icarus swallowed, unsure of what to say. "I am grateful to be alive, my lord. I know I was foolish." "Foolish, yes," Poseidon said, circling Icarus, his trident tapping against the stone of the cliff. "But there is something about you, Icarus, that intrigues even the gods. Perhaps it was not your hubris that led to your fall, but something else. Something more." Icarus frowned, unsure of what the god was implying. "What do you mean?" Poseidon's gaze grew sharp. "The gods have noticed you, Icarus. Zeus, Athena, Apollo, all of them. They whisper about you, the mortal who dared to reach for the sun. But it is I, Poseidon, who will issue the first challenge. For you began your descent into my realm, and it is my right to test you." A cold chill crept down Icarus's spine. "Test me?" Poseidon nodded. "Indeed. You will face a challenge of the sea, boy. And if you survive, you may find that your fall was only the beginning of your true destiny." Icarus's heart raced. What kind of challenge? "The sea is vast and untamable," Poseidon said, looking out over the ocean. "It is the domain of gods and monsters. I will give you a choice, Icarus. You may refuse my challenge and live out your days as a mortal. But if you accept, you will face the trials of the ocean itself. If you succeed, the gods will see you as more than just a fool who fell." Icarus clenched his fists, his mind swirling with fear and excitement. The thought of facing a god's challenge was terrifying, but the idea of proving himself, of showing that he was more than just the boy who flew too close to the sun, it was intoxicating. "I accept your challenge, Poseidon." The god's smile widened. "Good, then let the challenge begin." Chapter 3, The First Trial. The Maelstrom. Poseidon raised his trident, and instantly the calm sea transformed. The waters churned violently, swirling into a massive vortex that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky darkened, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Icarus could feel the ground beneath him trembling as the power of the sea awakened. "The first trial," Poseidon said, his voice booming like the crashing waves, "is a test of your courage and endurance. You will enter the maelstrom, and at its center lies the eye of the storm, a place where the sea is calm but only for a moment. You must reach it, survive the swirling chaos, and find the calm within." Before Icarus could respond, the sea rose up and engulfed him, dragging him into the depths of the whirlpool. The water was cold, biting at his skin, and the force of the current threatened to pull him under. He struggled to keep his head above water, gasping for breath as the waves crashed over him. The maelstrom was a chaotic force of nature, a swirling vortex of water that seemed to have a life of its own. The current was so strong that it pulled Icarus in every direction, spinning him around like a leaf caught in a tornado. The noise was deafening, the roar of the waves and the wind drowning out everything else. Icarus fought against the pull of the maelstrom, using every ounce of strength he had to swim toward the center. His arms and legs ached, and his lungs burned as he struggled to stay afloat. But he refused to give up. He had faced death before, and he had survived. He would survive this too. As he swam, he remembered his father's words. "Balance, Icarus. It's all about balance." The wings had given him the ability to fly, but they had also been a reminder of how fragile life could be. Now, without them, he had to rely on his own strength and wits. The storm raged around him, but Icarus focused on the rhythm of the waves. There was a pattern to the chaos, a moment when the current would shift, and if he could time it just right. He dove beneath the surface, letting the current carry him for a moment, before kicking hard toward the center of the vortex. The pull was strong, but Icarus had learned from his fall. He had learned not to fight the forces of nature, but to work with them. With a final push, he broke through the swirling chaos and found himself in the eye of the storm. The water was calm here, eerily so, and for a brief moment, Icarus floated in the center of the maelstrom, catching his breath. But he knew the calm wouldn't last. Chapter 4. The Leviathan and the Wings Reforged. As Icarus floated in the eye of the maelstrom, the water once again began to churn beneath him. A dark shadow slithered below the surface, growing larger and more menacing with each passing second. The stillness of the eye was deceptive. The storm outside roared on, and now something ancient and powerful stirred in the depths. It broke the surface with a thunderous crash, a leviathan, a creature of the deep, its scales gleaming like obsidian, eyes burning with an otherworldly glow. This was the second trial. Poseidon's voice boomed across the sky, carried on the storm winds. "Your second trial, Icarus, is to face the Leviathan of the deep. No mortal has ever bested this creature, but I am curious if you are more than just a mortal now." Icarus felt a chill crawl up his spine. The Leviathan's massive body coiled through the waves, its serpentine form cutting through the water with terrifying grace. Its roar was deafening, a sound that seemed to shake the very core of the ocean. But Icarus wasn't the same helpless boy who fell from the sky. He had learned during his long recovery. He had not just survived, he had innovated. In the weeks after his fall, Icarus had thought endlessly about his father's wings. The design had been brilliant, but flawed. The wax had been too vulnerable to heat, the feathers too fragile in the face of nature's forces. But Icarus, the son of Daedalus, possessed his father's genius for invention. While recovering in the village, he had quietly worked on something new, a redesign of the wings, made not from wax and feathers but from materials more suited to the challenges he now faced. He had scavenged bits of metal, sailcloth, and even parts of broken boats from the fishermen's village. He studied the way birds moved through storms, how fish glided through water, and how nature itself adapted to survive. After many attempts, Icarus created a new pair of wings, stronger, more flexible, and designed to withstand the fury of the elements. The frame of these wings was forged from lightweight but sturdy bronze, salvaged from the ruins of shipwrecks. Instead of fragile feathers, the wings were now layered with strips of hardened sailcloth, woven tightly together and reinforced with sea-drenched leather. Most importantly, the mechanism that held the wings to his back had been improved with gears and pulleys, allowing him greater control over their movement, both in the air and now in the water. These were no longer wings of a boy who had once flown too high. These were the wings of someone who had fallen and risen again, wiser, stronger, and ready for the trials ahead. Icarus took a deep breath, the memory of his fall sharp in his mind, but this time, it didn't fill him with fear. It gave him purpose. The Leviathan lunged, its massive jaws snapping at the air, water foaming around it as it charged toward Icarus. But with a flick of his arms, the wings snapped open, unfolding with a sharp, metallic sound. He kicked off the surface of the water and soared into the air, the new wings catching the wind of the maelstrom. Poseidon watched with a spark of curiosity in his eyes. "You've come prepared, I see." Icarus didn't reply. His mind was focused, his eyes locked on the massive creature below. He had never flown with these wings in such violent conditions, but the storm had no mercy, and neither did the Leviathan. The beast roared again, its serpentine body surging upward to meet him, slicing through the air with terrifying speed. Icarus twisted his body, using the wings to steer himself sharply to the left. The gears and pulleys responded smoothly, the wings reacting instantly to his movements. He dove back toward the sea, cutting through the rain and wind, his eyes sharp on the Leviathan. The creature's massive body coiled and writhed, causing waves to crash against each other, but Icarus was able to ride the chaos, using the winds and water to propel himself faster, higher. The Leviathan snapped its jaws again, missing him by mere inches. It dove beneath the water, preparing for another attack. Icarus knew he needed to strike before the creature could overwhelm him. He thought back to the stories of the gods, of how they fought great monsters in ancient times, and realized that brute strength alone wouldn't win this battle. He had to outthink it, just as his father, Daedalus, had outsmarted King Minos and his labyrinth. Icarus circled high above the storm, his wings catching the wind in wide arcs, allowing him to maintain altitude despite the raging maelstrom below. He watched the Leviathan, studying the way it moved, the way it attacked. It was a creature of instinct, its rage and size both its greatest strengths and weaknesses. Suddenly, Icarus dived toward the sea, using the force of gravity to increase his speed. The Leviathan roared and lunged upward, its massive head breaking through the waves, teeth gleaming as it came straight for him. But Icarus wasn't aiming for the Leviathan. At the last second, he pulled up sharply, his wings snapping open fully as he used the wind to shoot him higher into the sky, over the creature's head. The Leviathan, caught in its own momentum, slammed into the maelstrom's eye, momentarily stunned by the impact. This was his chance. Icarus banked sharply, his wings tilting just so, and dove again, this time toward the Leviathan's back. With a surge of adrenaline, he landed on the creature's scaled body, his feet gripping the slick surface as the storm raged around him. The Leviathan thrashed wildly, but Icarus used the wings to keep his balance, crouching low as he rode the beast's movements. He reached down, gripping a jagged scale, and with all his strength, he wrenched it free. The Leviathan roared in pain, its massive body thrashing even harder, but Icarus held on, the wings keeping him anchored. With the scale in hand, Icarus leaped into the air, soaring away from the enraged beast. The Leviathan turned, its eyes burning with fury, but now Icarus had what he needed. He wasn't trying to kill the creature, he only needed to survive the trial. He flew higher, the scale in his hand glinting with a faint glow. As he ascended, the storm began to calm. The wind softened, the rain slowed, and the maelstrom's swirling waters began to settle. Icarus hovered above the now calm sea, his wings flapping gently in the breeze. Poseidon appeared once more, rising from the depths, his trident held high. His expression was unreadable, but there was a gleam of respect in his eyes. "You have done well, Icarus," Poseidon said, his voice no longer booming but quiet, thoughtful. "You have not only faced the fury of the sea, but you have also faced yourself. Your father's wings were a gift of genius, but you have made them your own. You have shown that you are more than just the boy who fell." Icarus landed softly on the surface of the now placid ocean, the Leviathan retreating back into the depths, defeated but not slain. He breathed heavily, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. "You have passed my trial," Poseidon said, nodding in approval. But know this, your journey is far from over. The gods are watching, and there will be more challenges ahead. Each trial will test a different part of you, your body, your mind, and your soul. Chapter 5. The Gift of the Water Stone. As the calm sea stretched out before him, and Poseidon's form began to fade back into the ocean, Icarus felt a strange pull in the air around him. The trial had ended, but there was a lingering presence, a stillness in the world that suggested something more. Poseidon, with his deep and knowing gaze, paused for a moment before fully vanishing beneath the waves. The god of the sea turned back to Icarus, his eyes glinting with something almost fatherly, pride perhaps, or a recognition of the courage and determination Icarus had shown. "You have earned more than just my respect, Icarus," Poseidon said, his voice softer but filled with ancient power. "Few mortals have faced the fury of the sea and lived to tell the tale. Even fewer have shown the wisdom to adapt, to survive not through brute force but through wit and ingenuity. You have forged your own path, as your father did before you." With a gesture of his hand, the ocean began to ripple. The waves parted as if something immense stirred deep beneath the surface. A faint blue light shimmered from the depths, growing brighter with each passing moment. From below, a small stone slowly rose, carried on a column of seawater. It hovered in front of Icarus, gleaming like a piece of the ocean itself, with swirling blue patterns etched across its surface. "This is the water stone," Poseidon said, his voice now infused with reverence. "A gift that few receive and even fewer can wield. It is a shard of my domain, a piece of the sea itself, and it will grant you the ability to survive where others cannot. With it you will be able to breathe underwater, to withstand the crushing depths of the ocean, and to endure the harshest environments, even in the skies where the air grows thin." Icarus stared at the glowing stone in awe, its radiant blue light casting soft shadows across the water. He reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing against the surface of the stone. It was cool to the touch, but beneath that coolness was a pulse of life, an energy that hummed like the currents of the ocean itself. As his hand wrapped around it, the stone seemed to melt into his skin, disappearing from sight but leaving behind a faint glow that faded into his palm. The moment it merged with him, Icarus felt the change. A rush of power flowed through his body, like the swell of a wave crashing against the shore. He could sense the sea in a way he never had before. The rhythm of the tides, the life that teemed beneath the surface, the deep ancient pulse of the ocean. His lungs expanded with a newfound ease, and though he stood on the surface, he knew instinctively that he could dive into the depths and breathe as easily as he did above. "The water stone will bind you to the sea," Poseidon continued, "but it will also protect you beyond it. In the skies, where the air is thin and harsh, the stone will sustain you. In the cold, unforgiving mountains or the heat of deserts, you will find that you can endure. It is not immortality, Icarus, but it is the power to survive where others would perish." Icarus clenched his fist, feeling the residual energy of the stone settling within him. The realization of the gift he had been given was overwhelming. The wings he had reforged would carry him to great heights, but with the water stone, the limits of where he could go were shattered. He would not be bound to the earth, the sky, or even the sea. This gift made him something more, someone who could navigate the realms of gods and mortals alike. Poseidon's gaze softened for the briefest moment, a rare thing for the god of the sea. "Remember, Icarus, this is a gift, not a right. The power it grants you should be respected, not taken for granted. Use it wisely, for it carries the weight of my domain. The seas are vast and unpredictable, and though you now carry a piece of them, they will still challenge you should you abuse their power." Icarus bowed his head in deep respect. "I will not forget, Lord Poseidon. I will honor this gift, and I will face whatever comes with the wisdom I have learned." Poseidon smiled, a flicker of amusement crossing his ancient face. "Then we shall see how you fare in the trials yet to come." With that, the sea god raised his trident one last time. The water swirled around him, and in an instant, he disappeared beneath the surface, leaving Icarus standing alone on the calm sea. The water stone pulsed gently within him, a reminder of the divine gift he now possessed. For a long moment, Icarus simply stood there, the gentle breeze of the sea and the quiet lapping of the waves surrounding him. He looked down at his hands, feeling the residual energy of the water stone coursing through his veins. He took a deep breath, knowing he could now breathe in the water as easily as the air. He looked up toward the skies, knowing that the thin atmosphere would no longer suffocate him. He had not only survived Poseidon's trial, but he had emerged with something far greater than he had imagined. The boy who had once fallen from the sky had now been remade by his own hand and with the blessings of a god. His wings, reforged from the wreckage of his father's design, were now complemented by the power of the Waterstone, a gift that bridged the realms of earth, sea, and sky. As Icarus turned his gaze toward the distant horizon, where new challenges awaited him, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. The gods had more in store for him. He could feel it. The whispers from Olympus had begun, and the eyes of the divine were now upon him. But for the first time since his fall, Icarus did not fear what was coming. With the wings he had crafted and the Waterstone within him, he knew he could face whatever trials lay ahead. The world stretched out before him, an endless expanse of sky, sea, and land. And now, with the gift of the Waterstone, he was ready to rise and meet it. This was only the beginning.